Poducer.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to Poducer, the podcast for producers. Today we are joined by Fess. Is it Grandiose? I didn't even ask you.
Yeah, no, it's just Grandiose.
Grandiose,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Could some say Grandois, like if they were like French or something?
Yeah, it's happened before.
Okay.
And, don't feel bad.
I wouldn't be the first.
Yeah, people always ask and botch and say other things. Grandiose.
Yeah, Grandoise, like Blastoise.
Yeah. One time I got a birthday cake, and it was supposed to be my logo, but they spelled it Grandiose instead of Grandiose.
That's funny.
Yeah.
We are also joined by Going Somewhere, Lucas.
Yo, guys, how's it going? Happy to be here today.
Hell
Looking
yeah,
forward
happy to
this
have you here.
conversation. Absolutely.
Me too.
Hell yeah.
So, Fess, in a real blanket statement, what do you do?
Man, that's a good question.
That's what everyone says.
It's a great question because now I'm at the state where literally every week I'm trying to figure it out. But I am a DJ and a producer and electronic music artist. I like to just say I'm an artist, but you got to have so many different lanes nowadays.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just a lover of beats and production and gear nerd shit. It's like pretty much encompassed my entire life. So I've just been like rolling with it and having fun because the technology's out there. The fun is there to be had. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then I also think about it like there's different resumes to be had. Like, you also work at Reverb. You also are part of like another group where you guys do modular stuff. There's just like, it's like, what cover letter are you sending? I guess I'm kind of asking like for the general one, which general lover of electronic music and production.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and the Reverb bit has definitely been a wild ride too. It's also like a quintessential Chicago story that a lot of people don't really realize because Reverb is a Chicago-born brand.
Yeah.
And it's totally how our paths crossed. Just like doing my thing in the Chicago music scene for quite a few years now. It was just kind of like this convergence that was like probably bound to happen. Because I was like at Reverb launch parties like years before I even thought about working there, and like being there not even thinking about like what the heck, like why don't I go and work for this gear brand.
Yeah,
like,
you weren't like trying to get in.
Yeah, and then it just I basically started doing videos with them in 2019, and it was like from the get-go. After like the first video I made, it was like, all right, I need to kind of buckle down and like do this. Because it was already at a time where I was like wrestling with that, wanting to be like more on the content side. And I was like doing this thing with Open Beats, where I would like go to like producers' homes or setups or whatever and just like do a breakdown of like whatever.
Like under the hood.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I shot like essentially like a pilot episode of that with Slot A actually. And some people at Reverb saw that and they're like, you want to do that for us? I'm like, all right, let's try it out.
Yeah, hell yeah. You're going to pay me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And the rest is history. I kind of just like saw my lane with doing that level of content creation as far as just like focusing particularly on the pros of all the hardware that's out there, versus trying to like rip stuff to shreds, which there's a lot of that and that's like needed, but
like being a critic.
Yeah.
I get you.
Yeah, but it's fun and it's not something that is abnormal to me. Like my first job out of high school was at Sam Ash.
What's that? Sam
Ash Music Store. It's kind of like a Guitar Center.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then a year after that, my next job was at Guitar Center.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So you've always been a gear. You've always been a gearhead.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I want to get into all of this, and I like there's so many pathways to go, but I want to just do the typical question that I ask all my guests. It's like the icebreaker, and it's what was your first concert that you went to?
Oh wow. Damn.
Yo, what's up, guys? Before we get into today's show, I want to take a quick moment to talk about our sponsor, QUAKE. As music producers and concert enthusiasts, we know how important it is to protect our ears. That's where QUAKE's Dub Muffs V2 come in. They aren't just any earplugs, they're a game changer. What sets Dub Muffs V2 apart, first off, their quality. They're better than any plugs I've ever used. I use them all the time. I have custom in-ear plugs. These are my main ones that I bring to shows. You get premium sound clarity, preserving those crisp highs and deep lows, all while safeguarding your ears from damaging volumes. And the best part, they don't break the bank. Quality and affordability, son. Let's talk customization. QUAKE knows one size doesn't fit all. That's why they offer 2 sizes. Whether you're at an intimate gig or a massive festival, Dub Muffs V2 fit comfortably in your ears, making sure you're protected no matter how long the show lasts. Let's face it, we've all left concerts with ringing in our ears. It's not good, but it ends up happening. But it doesn't have to be that way. Protect your ears while enjoying the pure sound of music with QUAKE's Dub Muffs V2. As a special thank you to our listeners, QUAKE is offering an exclusive discount. Just use the code POD15 at checkout to save on your first purchase. As a motto of our show, make sure you protect your ears. Now let's get back to the show.
Well, how are we doing this? Like first concert like by myself or first concert with like family? And like you can do both. Sometimes people, they're like, okay, I was brought to a concert kind of against my will. Yeah, because there was a lot of that. My dad was like a funky guy and like into lots of great music, so he brought me along to like the first concert that I remember actually is seeing like Santana at the Taste of Chicago, like
Ooh, nice.
with my dad, and like being like dragged to it, but then also getting there and being like, damn, this
guy's shreds.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know, I was probably like maybe 9 or 10 at the time, and just having that moment like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get this now. But then the first concert that I went to kind of like in my adolescence, so this is this is definitely gonna like pop some bubbles, but I used to be like a hardcore metalhead when I was like, a young boy, 12, 13, 14. I like got caught up in the entire like new metal uprising, like Korn and Limp Bizkit and
nice
shit. I was all into that shit. I had chain wallets, Jinko jeans,
chain wallets that they kind of like hang on your pants.
Yep. And I was a skateboarder too, so
okay.
Yeah, I was just like into a lot of stuff coming up.
Kind of a punk.
Yeah,
a little bit of a punk.
Yeah. So my first concert was a metal concert. It was to go see this band Cold Chamber at the House of Blues, and then Disturbed was Disturbed was an up and coming band at the time, so they opened up for Cold Chamber, and the dude came out and like his little Hannibal Lecter get up, like they like brought him out on like a dolly, and he was like he was like straight jacket to the dolly and shit. I'm like 12 years old. With with my best friend who like his mom was like far in the back, like she like let us like go up in front and like we wanted to like get involved in the mosh pit and shit. Had like no idea what we were getting into.
That's probably an intense mosh pit too.
Yeah, like I instantly got brought into reality at that exact moment.
And other people have done that whole straight jacket, brought out on a dolly thing. I feel like what is it called? What is their name? The guys that wear the masks and are just crazy. I can't think of their name.
Rammstein.
Oh, they wear masks too? Rammstein's sick.
Are you talking about Slipknot?
I'm talking about Slipknot. Yeah.
Slipknot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, Slipknot. I was also in Slipknot. I mean, a lot of that shit, that was some good ass grooves. Like even now, like I won't let anybody talk shit about Korn. Like Korn is Korn is a great fucking band.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna end it right there. Like, you know, like I know that it was like sort of the thing to kind of like poke fun at like what nu metal was trying to do with combining like rap and rock, but like they did that and like kept their style going, and they're like still making albums, you know.
Did you enjoy the Korn Skrillex collab? Did you ever listen to that? I think there was like a couple tracks.
No, but like I never listened to it, but now that you say that, I could just like see or at least envision what I think that would sound like in my brain.
It goes hard.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. And of course Skrillex is a Korn fan too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's funny. I mean, a lot of people kind of come from like a metal background, especially if they get into electronic music. I hear that all the time because there's just like this power to it.
Yeah.
They're different genres for sure, but I don't know. I think it just kind of lends itself to just like you can make raunchy sounds, and that can be like the thing. You don't have to be like a wizard when it comes to music theory or whatever. You just gotta like play this powerful power chord or whatever, you know?
Yeah, and I never, you know, it's funny, I never picked up playing guitar, even though it's something that I still fancy doing. But I've always appreciated like good guitar playing. And it was just probably something that was instilled in me, like with all the music my dad listened to a lot of Hendrix and like Santana and like funk and stuff like that. So when I got wrapped up in the metal, it's just like, yeah, like these like banging ass drums and like these sick ass chords, like like I used to go to Ozfest and stuff too, dude. So I was like really into it.
Where's that?
Ozfest used to happen. Well, it was like a tour, so for the Chicagoland part of it, it would be out in Tinley Park, where I mean I don't know,
kind of like where Riot Fest is. Right?
No, is Riot Fest? No, Riot Fest is in Douglas Park now.
Oh,
excuse me.
Listen.
Yeah, edit that out. But no, it used to be when I was coming up. It was called Tweeter Center or the New World Music Center. It was like this big amphitheater out in Tinley Park. But now it's called something else.
Oh yeah, Tinley's like out there.
Yeah,
I actually just
South
saw
Burbs.
Disturbed like a year ago, and it was dope.
Yeah,
Disturbed is sick.
Yeah, they're still doing it.
They're still doing it. Yeah, a lot of it is about mental health awareness now, because you know over the years they've just like lost so many. I mean, I know that they were friends with like Chris Cornell and Chester, and I mean David Draymond, he got pretty emotional during that set. I think he cried a little bit. I was like, damn.
I bet.
Bro.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
you're right about
intense.
that. Yeah, I mean, it's good that like, you know, that's where the music was always supposed to be a shade of anyway. It wasn't necessarily a celebration of like
we're
dark
weird.
shit, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It was like you know, we're gonna present this to you, like we get it. You're probably a little weird too.
Yeah.
And like that's okay.
Right.
And come be weird with us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. But even throughout that time, I was still a hardcore rap hip hop fan. But at that point in my rebellious, like, you know, early preteens, I was like really into hardcore rap. So it was like I didn't really like the bling bling era, as it were. So I was like a hardcore Jay-Z hater from like 97 to like till basically when he discovered Kanye, because I was actually at that show. That's a funny story as well. I was like at that show, like still being a Jay-Z hater. I'm like probably 13, 14. It was the Sprite Liquid Mix tour, actually at the same amphitheater, Tweeter Center, and Jay-Z was the headliner. And then he brought out Kanye and like gave him that chain. And I just remember like sort of absorbing that moment, but like not really, because again I'm like a pre-teenager. I'm like, fuck Jay-Z, like all he raps about is like bling bling, like you need to rap this like real lyrical, spiritual, metaphorical, historical stuff, because that's what I was into back then, like Jedi Mind Tricks and Wu-Tang Clan and shit.
Nice.
But yeah, I was totally at that show, and it didn't really hit me until like years later when I like started producing, and you know, as you know, a young producer, like I was a hardcore fan of Kanye too, especially in the early days. And that's when I realized, like, damn, I was like there. And
Yeah,
just,
you were
like,
there for that moment.
and just
Dang.
being a hating teenager.
Well, that's typical of teenagers. It's just easy to hate. I still find myself being a hater a little bit.
Yeah.
I can't help it.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, man, long time ago. Definitely aging myself. But, you know, been around to see a lot, I guess. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, I feel like what I normally like to do is that question normally gets us to the point of like origin story of like making music. So maybe we can go into that. Like, when did you get, you know, the technology, whether it was hardware or software, to start making music?
Yeah, so I started with software, like, you know, and it was circumstantial because I wanted gear.
It's expensive.
Yeah, I used to get the Sweetwater. I was weird, man. So I would get catalogs just to like browse, even though I knew that like I couldn't afford it and that my parents weren't going to get it, but just like wish for it, you know. This was like before internet browsing really took off too. So the catalogs was like, that's how you show that you were like really in the shit. So I would get Sweetwater catalogs and like just read about gear and shit, and dream about gear, but then, you know, could never afford it. So Fruity Loops 5, like, downloaded from LimeWire.
And the pepper downloaded from the lime.
Yeah. That was my discovery with like making beats. And yeah, that was definitely probably in like 2002, 2003.
And what did you start making?
Beat wise?
Yeah, like what was your first thing that you were like, okay, this is what I want to make, even if you didn't make that because you're like, okay, well.
I was trying to make hip hop, and at the time too I was also MCing. So in the middle of high school a movie called 8 Mile came out, and I went and saw that with a girl, and then like this other kid who was also trying to get with this girl. And after the movie, this kid started freestyling. I'm like, man, it's pretty dope. I need to start rapping. And it was like next week I was like really serious about rapping.
Because also you were like, this guy's kind of flexing right now.
Exactly. Like I need to get my shit up. And so yeah, in the middle of high school I started MCing, and right at that same time I also started dabbling in Fruity Loops and making beats. And then got a little older, got out of high school, started realizing, you know, this rap shit's cool, but this beat shit's a lot cooler. Plus, I really wanted to start DJing. I was able to finally buy my first set of turntables, like right when I was working at Guitar Center.
Did you go for the CDJ setup, or did you go for like a controller? Did they have because the controllers are slightly newer, I guess.
Yeah, controllers were not around during this time. We had the Newmark CD mixes, so that was sort of like a controller. And we had a lot of the 19-inch like CD decks, where there would be like, you know, a dual CD deck that would just come out, and like you could like they had the mixer like attached to it. But no, my first setup was which I still own to this day, Technique 1200s. I was able to buy them used off somebody that was trying to sell them, and then ended up getting some Newmark, like whatever cheaper Newmark mixer that was around at the time. And yeah, I mean, I knew that I needed to start like with vinyl, because at that point in time, like a lot of the DJs who I wanted to be like were like turntablists, like winning DMCs and shit, like the Executioners and DJ Qbert and like a young A-Track. So I was like really wanting to do all that in the midst of making beats and like dabbling with MCing. So you could definitely see how like somebody like me like got wrapped up in like what people like Kanye meant at the time, because it's like, oh man, this dude's doing it all. Or like Jay Dilla, for instance, too, was like, man, this dude's doing it all. Like, this is how it needs to be done. So I embraced that ideology like really early in my like upbringing.
Yeah.
But eventually the beats and the DJing just took over, and I just kind of put the mic down and like
So you were emceeing as in rapping?
Yeah.
Not just like being the master of ceremony at a
No.
show and like announce whatever.
No, I was fully spitting. That's an Easter egg for somebody. You could probably still dig up and find some of my old rap tracks that I put out.
Do you have a name?
I was still going by Fess Grandiose, man. It's been my
No, it's a great name. Grandiose in itself is just like great.
Yeah, thanks, man. No, that's been the alias. My original rap name was Profess, so it was short for. It was actually like the main word, like I profess something, but then some people thought it was short for professor, and then I kind of like
Professor is cool because then you're just teaching.
I kind of like took on that for a minute, but then I was just like, nah, like, because then people like homies who I was with at the time making music with, they always just called me Fess for short, and the whole Grandiose thing was just like some rap stuff, just like trying to like sound cool.
No, it fits. It fits because like normally rappers' images are like bigger than life.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. But yeah, it's just a name that stuck because when I started DJing, it was very important to me to like not go by DJ Fess or DJ Fess Grandiose. I would like get real annoyed when people put that on the flyer. It's like, just put the alias there. So yeah, that name just stuck, and it was just like something to just keep rolling with, not really break something that was working.
Yeah, for sure. I also just wanted to open the floor to you, Lucas, just in case you had a question. If you don't have one, totally cool.
Perfect timing. So I was gonna say I don't want to derail like the origin story, but if you can backtrack a little bit to like the Sweetwater Dream days that you were talking about of looking at these catalogs, can you remember a particular device or particular instrument that you saw that it was like a dream of yours that now in your adulthood you can look back and be like, oh, I remember the moment that I finally got to hold that or see that?
Oh, it was the MPC for sure.
Oh,
I from the moment I like knew what that was. Even before I knew what it was, I always knew that I wanted like a drum machine. And on my dad's side of the family, it's a very musical side of the family. So I got a lot of cousins that do music, that DJ as well. And every time I go over like one of my older cousins' house, he would have like a few old Roland pieces that like I knew weren't MPCs, but I knew they were like close.
They were drum machines.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Before I like
sequencers.
Yeah. So then I would see this shit in Sweetwater. It's like, yeah, this is the one I want, And man, I was working in like Sam Ash and Guitar Center when like the MPC 2500 came out. Like I remember that day that shit arrived. And that's like the one that like Alchemist still famously uses to this day. But like when that joint arrived, it was like, to me, it was like revolutionary because of like how much hard drive space it had on it. You can get a CD burner.
Yeah, it was like 16 megabytes. Yeah. And you're like, dude, what?
Yeah. And like you could put a CD burner on it. It's like, whoa, like I could do everything on this MPC and burn the CD. Like that was a glimpse into the future. But yeah, it was definitely an MPC, and like I quickly realized with like software like Fruity Loops, and then later Reason, couldn't afford the MPC, but this is gonna like get me close. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm curious, like if you can think back to that time period. I know that, a device wouldn't necessarily be what it is at first, at least without seeing somebody do something dope with it. I'm curious to know at that time, like what artists, what producers were you seeing be associated with this device that gave you the idea that you could be as dope as that with this device? Like, if that makes sense.
Was the Alchemist doing stuff with it at that time?
At that time, Alchemist was on the, Ensoniq ASR 10. Which I have an older cousin that had that. Actually, he had the ASR, not the keyboard version, but like the desktop version. It was the same deal though. But no, Alchemist was on that at the time because I remember, this was like the early days of YouTube as well. So like, you could still find candid studio videos of people like Alchemist or like Dilla in the lab or some shit. And I definitely remember seeing stuff like that at that moment, but it was also like my direct exposure working at like a music instrument store like Sam Ash and Guitar Center and working around older individuals that like let me know like this is what so and such uses. To like prompt me into knowing that like, all right, if I'm gonna like try to get this sound, like I need to get this 2000 XL because this is what, you know, Dilla's using at the time, or this is what Premiere's using at the time. But I remember also shifting that when I started seeing things like Madlib using things like the SP303, and this was like a little bit later in the 2000s, like maybe like 2006 or 7 or 8. And then also like coming to realize that like, you know, you don't just need the MPC to like make this like dirty, grungy, like sample based hip hop. Like there's all this other stuff out here too. So yeah, man, we're kind of like going real deep with like my timeline of just like growing up, but like it also is very congruent with like, you know, where the gear is now and shit. Like I remember a lot of different changes and like big leaps and like what you can do just with like, you know, a new product getting released.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, obviously a lot of people probably listening would want us to talk about open beats, and we'll get there.
Yeah.
But I think this is just a good opportunity to talk about the gear and some of the stuff that you do with Reverb. I think the Fess picks, is that through Reverb? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, maybe we can get into the Fess picks and just like kind of how that started and just what it is.
Yeah. So I just get to like scour our marketplace and like find the coolest, like rarest piece of gear that's listed, and just get to dive head first into like what it's about and kind of like share what it's about. In a lot of cases it's stuff that I've at least like used or at least have been in the same room with or remember coming out. But with the synths, like it's a lot of like vintage synths that I just like kind of dream about.
Is the synth on my sleeve, does that have any relevance?
No, this is my homie Shami's new clothing line that he's jumping off. So I told him I'll represent if he gives me a nice sweater, and it's a comfy ass sweater. So,
it looks like some quality.
Yeah, Shami's got some thread connection. Like he was explaining, this is like the same threads that I don't know, some other fancy.
The Supreme
thing. Something like that. But it's comfy. So shout out to Shami Sosa, synth on my sleeve. Like I'm pretty sure these are available now actually. Nice. But anyways, my job at Reverb was always sort of to take a deeper dive into like the vintage gear side of things. So like that's basically my duty as like an editor. So being able to put my own spin on that and just like wax poetic about a synth, you know, that's basically what the Fess picks are about. And then in most cases too, like again, it's like stuff that I've at least like used, been in the same room with, or like
have researched.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but it's cool, man.
What's like, I don't know, it was a basic ass question, but like, what's like your favorite? Like, what's like one that you came across that you were just like, damn, this is either it's rare or it's just iconic?
Man, that's a good question. Because there's just so much.
Yeah,
just like so many.
We could choose a
synths.
few. Yeah,
there's like so many dope synths out there. But there's this one. So Techniques, they're famous for making turntables, but
right.
They also took a stab at making synthesizers.
Really?
And like workstation, like stage keyboards as well too. I used a couple. Back when I was growing up in church, like our church used to have this fancy Techniques stage keyboard that also had a sequencer on it. But anyways, they made this mono synth. I believe it's called the SY 200 or something like that. But I got to like fiddle around with one. at a synth shop years ago. So I remember seeing it like years ago and being like, whoa, Techniques made this. So then seeing it on Reverb and seeing like clean ones, like that were like better than the one that, you know, I got to fiddle around with. That's the like joy of Reverb, because they, you know, they usually pop up from like wherever in the world. And like, it's, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of older and vintage synth users that, I mean, if they're older, the synths aren't really vintage to them because they came up with them. But like, you know, if they've been around for like 30 plus years, they're basically vintage. But anyways, there's just like a lot of that. And then also too, man, just like it's like made me reappreciate Roland for like what they've done with music technology over the years and really putting their stamp on like advancing things forward. There's just like so many Roland synths and samplers and drum machines and other shit that you wouldn't even think that they made. Like Roland makes like laboratory equipment too,
like oscilloscopes and stuff like that, or
like a 3D printer.
Oh
yeah.
It like makes noises.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, Roland is like a behemoth.
But they're not necessarily like Sony or where it's like they make a lot of different shit. They primarily focus on music stuff, but then they're like, hey, we can make a 3D printer.
Right, if we wanted to, or we can make like crazy video equipment too, which they also do. But that's actually a good comparison. They're not like a Sony in the way that they're like dominating like all this consumer electronics. But when it comes to music gear, iconic sounds,
I mean, they made the 808 and the 909.
Right.
Those are both like,
that's what I mean,
the most heavily sampled drums probably in the world.
Yeah,
I would think, besides acoustic drums maybe.
No, you're kind of spot on with that. And yeah, man, there's this guy too that is famous for collaborating with lots of Roland development, particularly with the 808. This guy named Don Lewis. I actually got to write about him for Reverb, and he was a black keyboardist and organist, and he like met Ikitaru Takahashi, who was the original founder of Roland. He like met him like in the 60s when he was like demoing a Hammond organ, and he took Roland's, at the time Roland was called Ace Tone. That was the first brand before he changed the name to Roland, and they made this one of the first drum machines. It was called the Rhythm Ace, and Don Lewis took this thing and like manipulated it so he can make his own rhythms on it, because it was only preset rhythms that you could play at the moment. So he like opened it up and like put in some diodes and like did a bunch of soldering and shit and like just manipulated it so it worked for him, and he basically allowed him to program it the way that he wanted to. And he's playing it next to, or he was using it to be accompanied with the organ that he was supposed to be demoing. And the original guy who founded Roland saw this and was just like, it's pretty ingenious. And they were like friends ever since. And Don Lewis worked on like a few different synths for Roland, but he also like famously worked on the 808, and like that 808 boom is like basically like, you know, something that he really pushed forward to like getting done on there.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love this like history. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And that's sick.
Yeah. He also worked on the he also worked for Yamaha. And
another staple right there.
He made a lot of the presets that's on like the DX7. And that DX7,
we were just fucking around with some Arturia synths, and the DX7 popped up. I was like,
that DX7 is like the sound of the 80s.
Yeah.
So this guy basically like created like the sound of the 80s. Like,
damn, this guy is pivotal.
Yeah, he's a dope dude. You know, he just passed away a couple years ago, R.I.P., but he's definitely like an unsung hero.
Damn. I'm curious too, just talking about like, you know, Roland, obviously a name that a lot of people know, and I think that the hype is deserved. But what are some companies where the hype, it just like is overhyped? Like, is it teenage engineering? Like, also another question is kind of like, how do we feel about Behringer? They kind of like just steal shit.
Right. Oh man, dude, that's a
whole other conversation too.
That is the Behringer issue is definitely a hot issue.
It's an issue.
Yeah.
Can you guys explain that for people that that are watching that might not know? Because I personally don't know, so I'd love to know more about that kind of situation.
Yeah. So with Behringer, Behringer is ran by this guy Uli Behringer, and he's got a whole mode of operation where he basically looks at every classical or vintage synth that was ever made, like to be, he wants it to be more accessible, and he believes that all the schematics and the engineering and development done in a lot of these classic synths should be available to the public, and he's like pushed for getting a lot of IP, as you will, available for him to basically use to develop his own generic versions of these classic synthesizers. And
he's cloning all these like classics.
And on one hand, I've been very conflicted about Behringer because, you know, as a black producer, black music maker, we don't really get to come up in the world that like a lot of you know, European producers that maybe grew up with a dad who like also made music or like made prog rock and had this like EMS synth sitting around or bestowed it down to them, or like, you know, stories that you hear about, you know, people's dads having like Moog Model Ds from their time running around in a band in like the 60s or 70s or whatever, and then we're able to give it to their, like, we don't have those stories. So I've always thought that what Behringer was trying to do with making expensive synths more available, I thought it was like, you know, good in theory, but getting into the industry and hearing directly from developers from these brands that Behringer is ripping off to an extent, I've sort of like, that viewpoint has sort of been challenged for me, you know? And now I'm like at this point now where I don't necessarily celebrate Behringer, but I'm also just like, it is what it is. And, you know, for every prescription medication, there's like going to be a generic version of it. So that's kind of like where I've gotten to get to with Behringer at this point. But like, you have like highly distinguished musicians and composers like Hans Zimmer, for instance. Like, he uses Behringer live for like his like concert tours and stuff. Like, he's not going to take a real ARP 2600 out live. He's going to use the Behringer one because like, why take the real one out and like fuck that one up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Jeff Mills like uses, like, he was seen using the Behringer 303 live. So I mean, a lot of it is like, you know, at the end of the day, the crowd, the listener, they're not really going to care that much. It's kind of like the same argument with like analog versus digital right now. And digital has come a long way in that regard. Like, so, you know, I'm not really a Behringer, like F Behringer type of guy. These people do exist. But I also get like people's frustrations with the brand, and also, especially
as like a developer of stuff, and then they just like steal it. You know?
And also like they've done some like pretty shady stuff. Like there was that instance a few years ago where they like made fun of the editor of CDM, Peter Kern, and they did some like really foul like anti-Semitic jokes, like,
I've heard about this.
So like
basically Uli's like on Twitter and it's like a problem.
And like that's the type of stuff where I'm just like, again, I'm never really going to celebrate Behringer in that regard, but I'm also like, you know, I'm not going to necessarily ignore everything that they do, because I have a few friends that like have gotten their Model D clone, and like it sounds good.
Yeah.
Like it does.
I mean, the 303 I've used, and it's like,
Same.
it works good. If you want to make acid, it's like, yeah, you know, not bad.
Right.
I just feel like I think it goes a little bit deeper than maybe people might realize. And like the good intentions of giving the tech to all is kind of cloaking maybe the like predatory aspect.
Yeah. And I don't have any rebuttal to that, especially, you know, getting to be behind the scenes a little bit, and again hearing from a lot of these developers themselves, you know. So actually in a few weeks I'm taking off to Berlin for Superbooth. It'll be my 3rd year going, and there's a strong anti-Behringer like sentiment out there. Like you walk around and you see like F Behringer like stickers on stuff.
Damn.
Yeah, and
that's awesome that you're going to that.
Yeah,
this feels like what you were talking about in your childhood, looking at the Sweetwater magazines.
Yeah.
Like now you have like the dopest position to fulfill the dreams that you had as a kid.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's definitely cool, and it's, you know, it's cool to be able to like get to know the people behind these brands, and be able to call some of them friends. That's the like real cool thing about it.
Yeah, that's dope, dude.
Yeah.
What's just to stick on this, because I think the gear talk, there's obviously a lot of gear nuts out there, and I don't have that much analog gear, but I aspire to at one point at least get some nice stuff. Kind of a 2-part question. Most overhyped, because that was kind of like my most overhyped brand, and first thing that comes to mind is kind of like Teenage Engineering, like OP1. Like it's sick. It's a little expensive in my eyes, but they do really make some cool, innovative stuff. And then the second question is like, what is some new, like a new company out there that's making innovative stuff?
Okay, well,
yeah, sorry to hit you with two. I just didn't want to forget it.
It's all good, man. Most overhyped brand. Wow, you're really kind of putting me in a bind here.
I've heard that Moog is like, aren't they kind of like going under or something? Like, is Moog still as good? I don't know. There's too many questions.
No. It's all good. Well, first off, most synth heads will correct you right off the bat and say it's Moog.
Oh shit, I'm fucking up.
No, it's all good, man. It's all good. Because I mean, even that, you know, it's arguably subjective, but you know, the man himself said that his name is Moog.
Yeah.
But no, so Moog got bought out by this company called NMusic, and NMusic is they're like a mega corporation. They own several brands that you know of, including Akai, which of course makes the MPC. They also own Newmark, Denon,
that's interesting.
Alesis,
M Audio.
Yeah, they own a lot. So they most recently acquired Moog, and you know, the fear was, as soon as that happened, was that Moog's going to stop hand making all of their synthesizers in Asheville, North Carolina, like they've been doing for the last 50 plus years, and outsource it all to, you know, assembly lines wherever NMusic has their assembly lines at. And so far it definitely seems like things are going in that direction, unfortunately. From the small little peep that I've gotten to see, but also too, Moog's got some stuff coming that like maybe it's not going in that direction. So it's good to know that, like, at least as of now, NMusic at least recognizes like the importance of Moog, and like the importance of handcrafted analog synthesis. And also the brand recognition that Moog has just like had in that regard. So maybe they're like realizing that, you know, maybe we shouldn't rock this boat too much.
Yeah, it would be good in a sense if they just put the money behind whatever's already happening.
But that's what I mean. Like, it seems like things are going that way, because there has been like, job cuts and stuff since M-Music has taken over.
Mm-hmm.
They've also announced that they're closing their Asheville factory.
Oh, damn. The iconic fact. Yeah.
Right. So that's what I mean. Like, it seems like things are going that way. But then they got this new thing that, like, everybody's playing. Like, Usher had it at the Super Bowl, and, like, Mike Dean was just playing it. Like, they got this new polyphonic synth that's coming that, like, seems to be pretty cool. So
this is also something that just, like, happens with brands. Like, the first thing I could think of is just with camera lenses. It's like, back during this era, the Nikon lenses were the best and the Canon lenses were good. And then now it's like, they're not that great anymore. And there's just always, you can't be on top forever.
Right.
So I think it is also just sad if we do lose like the real good vintage, the handmade stuff. But I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not too precious about these things either. It's like, it's completely out of my control. Mm-hmm. Another thing that's interesting is like, a lot of these big conglomeration corporations suck up smaller companies, and then everyone always thinks, oh no, what's going to happen? I saw that Pioneer got bought up by, I forget what company it is, but I was also reading that they're keeping the same engineer. So it's like,
right.
You never know. You can speculate.
Yeah, you never know for sure. And like even when I go to these trade shows and talk to, people from these brands directly, you still like never know,
Yeah.
But man, going back to your other question.
Yeah, sorry, overhyped.
Overhyped. I get the sentiment around people feeling like Teenage Engineering is overhyped, because I even felt that. I felt that, especially the last couple years, like with their whole field rollout, like with the field table and like the field mic.
Oh, I don't even think I know what that is.
Yeah, that's like, that their little handheld mixer they have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like so expensive.
Right. So that is like a part of like this field kit, as they call it.
Yeah, and they made the OP1 field.
They made the OP1 field. They made that condenser mic.
Oh.
They made that table.
That's I don't even know about the table. That sounds cool. You're like,
you should pull it up. It's like a $1,500 table.
Okay, I'm already. Is it a stand-up desk? Does it like do stuff? No. Okay.
Yeah, it's the field desk.
Interesting. They have a case for the OP1 that's $200, and it's a leather case, and I'm just like, yo.
But on the flip side, the OP1 field is pretty dope.
It is
like
dope.
You said, the OP1 is dope, and OP1 field is pretty dope. Feels good. And recently I've turned a page on that mixer, the the TX6, just because I've seen it use with the new joint that they dropped, the EP133. I've seen my homie had that all set up, like I believe through the mini audio cable. But it was just like a sleek setup. Like, oh yeah, he was going out of that mixer USB-C into the laptops, because that's also an interface as well. And seeing that all work together made me kind of step back and be like, all right, I see what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
And when that EP133 dropped, I got to see it like about a month before it came out. The same homie I'm speaking of, he brought it over. He was a beta tester for it, and he brought it over to my crib. And it was at that moment where I was holding this thing and I was like, all right, now I see where you guys are going. And he was telling me what the price was going to be at the time. I didn't believe him. I was like, no way. Like, y'all just dropped this $2,000 mixer. You know what I mean? And like all this other expenses, the $1,500 desk, like no way this thing's only going to be $300. And sure enough, it was. And sure enough, it like instantly sold out.
Is this the one where it's like kind of analog or like modular parts? No,
this is the new sampler that they dropped that looks like a calculator.
Oh,
yeah.
You know who owns that? Frequently Flyer.
Yeah,
I think.
Wait, but this is different than like the KO2 or whatever.
That's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah. That's the one you're talking
about. The KO2
Dude,
EP133 is
bro.
Yeah,
that thing is sick. I've seen. I think Slot A has one too, and it looks. Not necessarily that it would be the 404 killer or anything, but it seems like it's pretty cool.
Dude, if you have that and a 404, you got
a good little setup.
You could do a lot of stuff. But that thing is really cool on its own. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So like, I was in the same boat where like, you know, that the mixer that they dropped wasn't really speaking to me. Oh, and then the recorder, the like
that like gray thing.
It's like a tape cassette loop recorder. It's cool. It's a cool gadget. But I mean, I think that's like $1,200.
So this is that is interesting that they dropped the. I'll just call it the KO2, like, and it is relatively cheap compared to some of the other stuff. They're like, damn, this is like you can buy that thing, or you could buy a sleeve for your OP1 that arguably doesn't protect it from anything but dust. Like,
yeah. So I will say that even after feeling that way personally, those guys know what they're doing. Like, they know, they have supreme brand loyalty. They also know what they're doing with like getting new buyers into like their brand and their whole ecosystem, you know, because like even before the KO2, they had all the other pocket operators, and those were the affordable teenage engineering joints, and those things are
good,
fucking good. I mean, the KO2 was based off the first one, which was the KO1 PO33 or whatever, and that is like basically a limited or a stripped down sampler version of the bigger one.
Yeah, and it's actually, I've seen people get like little cases for it that look like the SP404, and they have like better buttons and stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I would love to have one of those little guys. You could literally just throw it in your pocket. It's great.
Yeah, I've seen somebody rock a whole set, like a whole beat set of open beats with one of those.
Really?
Yeah, it was dope. Green Slime actually did that. Shout out Green Slime.
That's sick.
Yeah.
Word. Well, you know, again, I think that this would be a good point to get into the thing that, like, you know, we really know you for. Before we were on the podcast, me and Lucas were talking about how we actually met at Open Beats. If you don't know what Open Beats is, it's at Dorian's, hosted by Fess. And I'm not going to speak for what it is. I'll ask you about that. But what I really want to know is kind of the origin of that. And I also have heard from some of the other beat makers in the scene that, you know, you were kind of with some other people that were doing these things, and then you brought it. I just want to know the lineage.
Yeah. So
and this is the part where we talk about Open Beats.
Man, yeah. I don't really think about it that intently until I'm asked about it. But yeah, I've been doing Open Beats for 8 years now. And it's literally just the open mic for electronic music, for beat sets, weird electronic ambient sets if you want to, techno, house. Like, we do all genres. And
you got DJs, you got people coming up with their samplers,
right? And also too, like, if you have vocals on your track, like, and you produced it, like, we welcome that as well. The whole point of it was always supposed to be a multi-genre affair, all with praising instrumental produced music, like, period. So I started at Cafe Mustache. At the time, they wanted me to DJ there, and at that point in time, I was already DJing across the street at East Room and down the street at the Owl, and even sometimes at the Emporium, Logan Square right there, or the Emporium in Wicker Park. So I'm like, I'm already DJing, like, in the vicinity of here. I need to do something different. And at that point in time too, the only night we really had for all this weird pushing button beat night stuff was this night called Push Beats. And that was the night where I first performed my first, like, electronic beat set.
What did you perform on?
I actually did it on Serato at that point in time, because I didn't really have any hardware yet. And this was probably like maybe like 2011 or 12, something like that. And right after that, I got into Ableton, but using it as a performance tool, because I was already using Ableton to make beats. I never really got into like the clip launching aspect of it, honestly, until I started rolling the push beats, and it was like dudes there like Raj Mahal and Kos and even Uncle L, who, you know, DJs the open beats, and Radius. A few of those guys, they were using Ableton Live, and they were using like the old APC controllers or like the old Akai MPD controllers to like trigger the clips. And you know, it's definitely like lore at this point, but I'm a firm believer in the thought that push beats inspire Ableton to make the push controller.
Why do you believe? Do you think that has to do with like like an Ableton, like someone who works for Ableton that saw what was happening?
Yeah, because at that same time that we had push beats going, Low End Theory was also taking off in like LA.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these same names that I mentioned, you know, when they would go out to LA, they would like be able to perform at Low End Theory.
And really quick, who was Low End Theory put on by?
But that was Gas Lamp Killer.
Oh, okay. So like some of the brain feeder people
and Daddy Kev and Flying Lotus.
Sick.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely something that like us, like Chicago, you know, beat heads that were around for push beats, we all kind of like sit and just agree amongst ourselves that like, yeah, Ableton like got the idea for push from us, because like, I mean, they really pushed it forward as far as like branding.
The name. Yeah. I didn't think about the name.
Yeah. Like push beats was like a thing, for sure. And it definitely had like a little national buzz for a second, as far as kicking off our beat scene here. So when I did open beats, like, you know, I literally went to these guys and was just like, is this cool if I like do this? Like I know this is kind of like, you know, a stretch on like the name, like something beats, but I'm also trying to like open it up more and like make it be more inclusive. And yeah, it's just like something that just kind of like, the energy was already going there anyway. Like, we live in a big city, so that we were already getting an influx of like producers that were getting this itch to like get out and maybe start DJing or just start playing their beats out, because that's like becoming a thing now. You know, this was like, you know, in the early 2010s I'm speaking of. But yeah, I was merely just trying to like, I guess, carry that torch, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but yeah, since then I've like met so many cats, including yourselves. So to hear y'all say that y'all met at Open Beats is just like, wow.
Yeah. No, dude, it's weird. Yeah, it is. I'm sure that must be weird.
Yeah.
But you are definitely the guy when it comes to this. I'm kind of curious when Push Beats dissolved, and if that was running in tandem with Open Beats for a period of time.
It was. Man, I would have to have somebody like L tell a story, but Push Beats used to be at this spot called Roland, which is actually used to be kitty corner to where Open Beats is now. It was in Wicker Park, off of it was actually on North Avenue. So like Roland is where, what is there now? What's that spot right next to where the Yeti store is?
Oh, yeah. What is that called?
I don't know. I think it's like a restaurant now, actually, or something. But anyways, R.I.P. Roland. That was the location for Push Beats, and Push Beats used to be weekly. It wasn't monthly. And that's really what established it in my mind. Like, it was, I believe, like a Wednesday or Thursday night, like every week, like in the middle of Wicker Park, when Wicker Park was like still on the rise and not like
what it is today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if you're not from Chicago, Wicker Park is basically like the trendy.
Yeah.
I've actually heard that Fred Armiston, whatever. He based Portlandia off of Wicker Park because he would he was in a band and was like in Wicker Park, and
I believe that.
Portland is kind of like Wicker Park, but like bigger.
Yeah, I believe that, and I've been to Portland a few times, and I totally agree. Even though Portland's got like, it's kind of like Wicker Park, bigger, but then it has this like hard fall off into like, just like, oh, where the fuck am I?
Yeah, shit, yeah, like a bunch of homies rolling around.
Yeah. So once Rodan closed, Push Beats kind of had to like move around for a little bit, and they used to do it at Double Door, or they used to do it at Double Door's basement venue that they had for a while, and it really kind of jumped off there too. But then so I started Open Beats in like 2016, and Push Beats was still moving around and going monthly, but it just like wasn't like, the people that started it started moving away from the city, and then it was like all the thing that like L needed to manage, and just like one thing led to another,
Didn't make sense. Quite. Yeah.
But I heard that like, don't count Push Beats out, like they might still pop out and do a reunion or something some point soon.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like all the beat heads in the city would be like, we have to go.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think it would be welcomed.
Yeah. But it's also like, what's been welcoming is the fact that like we have so many other nights now. Like that's the thing that I've always preached. Like, it doesn't just need to be just Push Beats or Open Beats or like whatever. Like we need a night, like every night, that can be catered towards what we do,
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, so we did the House of Beats, which was like done under the podcast umbrella, which is funny because it's like a podcast is doing an Open Beats type of thing. And I even felt like, I was talking to B4 Lasers, I was like, am I stepping on people's toes here? And he was like, actually the date that you got is kind of perfect because no one's doing anything that night. And I was like, okay, well that's good. But I did feel like there was at least a little bit of like, I want to get the right people to kind of like be like, yeah, this is good. Like you're not fucking with anyone here. But it's good to hear from you that it's like more is welcome,
dude.
And I don't know if I'm going to do them again, but it was really cool. It was a great time.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Like at the end of the day, like we got to represent for ourselves. Like I've been around long enough to know that trends come and go, and like right now, like what we do is definitely like trendy in terms of like talent buyers from venues seeing what we do. We're becoming more visible. It's becoming more of a thing to like have lo-fi beats at like your nightly establishment. But when that time comes where that's like not the thing, like where else are we going to turn? And I always encourage people to like diversify and experiment with like how they're doing things too. I mean, this is part of the reason why I dove so deep into synthesis and with Modular, because like, I also DJ, but at the end of the day, with being a producer, I ended up coming to find that a lot of things that I would sample, a lot of things that I would just like to spin, it was all like super electronic-y, weird synth bass, space rocky type music. So finally I had to say like, I need to learn like how these cats like made this stuff, I just encourage producers to like have that approach with how they're like making their stuff. Like there's more than one way to like come to the same destination,
Oh yeah. No, and I mean, it just makes me think about my own journey. I got into this on the electronic side of stuff. The first thing I ever learned, even before like the DAW, was like synthesis, and didn't know any theory or anything. And then you kind of just like pick up what you need. If you investigate, you start learning. And then a buddy of mine put me onto sampling, and I was like, this is fucking crazy, like in a completely different way. And now I feel like it's cool to do like a blend of that, or maybe get some modular. I'm not at the modular stage, but like, yeah, I do see what you're saying though. Some people are kind of siloed in that they come up in a certain way and they're like, I'm just gonna keep doing it like this. And I do see how, like, if you don't diversify your assets in a sense, that you could, you know, kind of get left behind. Maybe
it happens a lot in hip hop too, and I know because I mean I'm from that cloth. So it's like you come up, you're a hip hop producer, like you develop a style. Maybe you work with the artist or two, or maybe you are that artist that like works with your style, and then like that's just the style that like you make. And I don't like knock that. I mean, that's a whole separate conversation. I'm just saying that, like, you know, whenever you're like feeling bored or feeling like you kind of are itching for something new or kind of lacking creativity in the lane that you carved out, there's just like so many other lanes to jump into now.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure.
I'm curious real quick. I have a couple questions that kind of stem off of some stuff you guys were talking about. So one, I'd be curious to know from your experience of being someone that not only started an event in Chicago, but has maintained it all of this time. I'd be curious to know for someone watching, you know, what advice you might give to someone who's looking to start their own event. I'd be really curious to know about that. And then the second question would be, well, we can start there.
Yeah.
Well, this is easier said than done now, but I feel like now you need to kind of, if you're going to start an event somewhere, you kind of need to embed yourself into whatever establishment you're trying to do it at. You kind of need to embed yourself in like their trust, their culture, their scene, like what they're into, and really basically get it in your head that like this is the right place to like do this at. And that's something I've only like learned through the years of doing it. Cause I've tried to have residencies at like spots that like people just weren't going to or weren't coming to. So I know it's like the saying, like location, but I feel like in Chicago that is kind of important still. You know, every neighborhood kind of has like their own vibe, and sort of different things going on. But at the end of the day, like, you know, when like a spot is like right to like do something, especially something like what we're doing, you know, weirdo instrumental beat music, you know, where most of the people that are going to come out and like celebrate the stuff are the people that are like also going home and making this stuff. So that's definitely been the sort of like the main thing that I've had going with Open Beats. Like I've been able to do it at like two great establishments. Like Cafe Mustache still to this day is like an awesome fucking establishment. And I'm so happy that there's like even more like electronic stuff going on there, like since we've moved on to Dorian's. But then you have Dorian's and it's like this like little cocktail speakeasy that like you don't even know what you're walking into, with this crazy ass sound system, nice stage, you know. It's definitely like my whole idea of moving it from Mustache is just trying to like elevate things so producers feel like they're getting more of an actual show, putting on more of a show than, you know, you would be able to do at like a place like Mustache, for instance. Plus, like when I saw a few shows at Dorian's, like particularly the Alchemist and then DJ Premier, shout out to RTC for bringing those cats through. When I saw those shows there, I was like, yeah, I need to move Open Beats here. It has a certain energy that I need to tap into.
You spoke a little bit on it when you're talking about like encouraging people, I think, to like experiment a little bit with their style. Maybe this isn't what you meant, but I'm curious, with where you've seen kind of the beat scene evolve, especially something like Open Beats, how would you like to see things evolve, and what would you hope for the future of this kind of culture and this scene? And do you have any ideas about ways that you think things could continue to improve, and then also potential pitfalls of areas that it could not expand and just go downhill?
Yeah. Well, I still feel like there's plenty of room for growth, particularly with like, you know, like myself, like hip hop producers getting into releasing instrumental albums, going out and performing their music live on stage. My little thesis, if you will, is that like I encourage hip hop producers to realize that with the moment that you start doing this, like you are you're not just a producer anymore. You're an electronic music artist, and like you're going on stage and you're performing your creations in front of people. So to a degree, people still expect a performance. And this is what I've always tried to like encourage at Open Beats and kind of like lead by example. Cause there's just so many different ways to like actually electronically perform your music. And it doesn't have to just constitute hitting play off tracks that you made in the studio, you know? So I encourage all producers getting into this to just like keep that in mind, that like you are still on stage and, you know, people are still expecting to see some sort of live aspect of what you do. Whether it's finger drumming, whether it's modular, whether it's like completely improvising your grooves on the spot, which is like a lot of what I've been doing lately. Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's fresh to like, to be out there and to be, you know, playing your music in that way. And there's so many ways to like do that and still like have it still sound like, you know, the genre that you are trying to like make, whether that be hip hop or house or techno or drum and bass or jungle or like some, you know, future funk mix in between, like vaporwave or whatever. Like whatever you're trying to represent on stage electronically can be done. So just dive in and just do it, you know. But like downfalls, I don't know. I think the only downfalls we have are like what I kind of spoke to earlier, like where like you know, trends are trends, and you know, lo-fi beats to study to is like the trend right now, but like will that be the case in like 4 or 5 years from now? So to that I just say like that's really what I fear. I worry about more of like the macro aspect of like where all musicians are going as far as being able to like make this a viable career.
Yeah.
Than I do like see with foreseeing like the pitfalls of like you know, the beat scene or like the electronic scene. I feel like as long as we got ourselves, and as long as we're all like going home and like making weird ass beats and trying to share it with friends, I feel like we will always have, you know, our base. But can that be a viable career moving forward? Like,
to make money. Yeah.
That's a whole separate argument.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you like gotta really get back into, you know, the argument of like what you're trying to make and how you're trying to be represented. And that's something that I haven't even figured out yet. Like you know, that's like right when we sat down and we were talking about edit beats and the glitch mob and them using modular on like festival stages, like that's actually the glimmer of hope that I have for not just electronic, but like the normalization of like having gear on stage again and like just elevating your performance. I feel like is about to come. I feel like the average electronic music fan, festival goer is starting to get a little bit aware of like the last 10 years of like, you know, shit like Dead Mouse was talking about, like DJs playing pre-made sets and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like that veil is starting to come down.
For sure. I feel like the part that we were talking about, it being like a viable career in terms of like actually making money, I think we're all kind of holding our breath about that, because there is technology that's making it really, really easy to just pump out.
Have you tried that Suno AI shit?
No, but I have messed around with a lot. I was actually going to download this one. It's called Synth GPT, and you like type in a prompt and it gives you a synth preset. I mean, that's different. I have seen people on YouTube using like Google Colab to like analyze Dilla beats and then like put in a prompt and then they like make a beat, and it's not as exciting as when someone makes it, but you just got to think that it's only going to get better. You know, and I feel like we always talk about AI because it just interests me, but I think this actually would be an interesting conversation with you, especially sitting in a place where you get to see some of the new tech. What was the one that you were talking about?
I believe it's called Suno. You You might want to reference that. I'm pretty sure it's called Suno. Mike Dean was showing it to us. Yeah, Suno AI. This thing is crazy. Same deal. You type in prompts, but it'll generate a full song, lyrics and everything.
Oh yeah, I have seen this one. Yeah.
Yeah. And
This looks interesting.
Mike Dean was showing us when we did that.
Yeah, sorry, we don't have the images today, but we'll have it next time.
That was the first time I saw it. I had heard about it, but I hadn't really had somebody like, you know, sit there showing me how it works. And he was typing in like, you know, just like random stuff like chilling with Reverb, or I bought it on Reverb or something. And let's just say that like I don't want my like bosses to hear the results of that, because then I probably wouldn't have a job. So because it was just like, you know, songs that were like, that could definitely be like the predecessor to like commercial jingles and stuff.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I could totally see CEOs out there like, oh yeah, why don't we just use this? Why do we need to hire a musical director?
Yeah.
Or why do we need to hire this like producer to like make this music for us, and we could just like use that? So I do worry, and I was not worried about AI generated music until I heard this Suno thing.
Yeah, I used to work for a company called Songfinch. Have you ever heard of them?
Yeah, I've heard of Songfinch.
Yeah, and they, you know, I don't know how much this is like, I think I could talk about this, but basically like, you know, they had a service where you pay an artist to make a song for you. And, you know, sometimes they'd use music that's already made and then do the lyrics. The lyrics was the main thing, but then, you know, they were doing other stuff where, you know, they're recording artists to, I wonder if I can talk about this actually.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah,
I'm just going to stop because I don't know. But basically what I'll say is, with what you're talking about, I think already there's enough raw data of people singing into a microphone to then be able to create authentic vocals from that. And we're kind of already there.
Yeah, it's
which is
insane.
wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's wild, and it's wild that it's all come to a head with this like rap battle that's happening right now. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. The thing, yeah.
No, I like,
it's kind of like what to think about that.
yeah, I can't even say that like I'm surprised at this point that like it's now become like an issue of like, oh dang, was that even real or was that AI? And it's like, oh no, dude, that was AI. It's like, damn.
Yeah, like, dude, it's crazy. Well, so the thing that I think about with you know, like the career wise of like actually making money off of this, that totally comes into question. And I fear if you are making your money solely off that might not be as viable. But I feel like if I were to give myself advice on this, would be like, you know, if you love music and making music, there will always be jobs there. They just might not be the jobs that you thought that they were, because there'll be jobs in the future that never existed.
Right.
So I think if I were to tell myself advice, it'd be like, kind of like what you were saying before about like experimenting with new things, like just keep trying to find what's new and cool in music, and maybe based off everything you've done before that you could like find another thing that you're into, find a place where you can help out with like this new tech,
right.
or like, you know, I mean, I feel like there might be like a selling your soul thing where it's like you're helping like AI get better at music. Like that kind of sounds like a conflict of interest, but I don't know, man. It's like, it's kind of like you can't stop it.
I know.
So,
and like, you know, I do like the stem separators.
Yeah, and stuff.
Yeah, all that. Like I've been very active trying and comparing which stem separator is better than the other. And
what do you think is the best?
Personally, I think that RipX is the best.
Okay.
RipX gives you like the most control. It like layers all of the stems out on a piano roll, so you can literally move like all the artifacts around to like whatever different key you want, or just remove them entirely. So once it does does like its automatic pass with separating the stems. You can go in and like clean it up and just make it sound perfect. I mean, you got to pay for it, but like they have like a whole DAW based off of their stem extractor now. Yeah, I mean it's pretty dang good. Serato sample is not far off either.
Serato's like, yeah. I'm kind of pissed. I just bought an RX2 because it's like, you know, everyone uses record box. It's like the industry standard. It's kind of like booty compared to some of the stuff you can do in Serato, especially with some of the new controllers where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna like grab the vocals and then mix. Yeah, but they don't have that in record box.
Dude, they have a record box. They have a stems thing in record box, but it does not sound good at all. You gotta pay. You gotta pay extra for it. Yeah, but it doesn't sound good. And
well, it's weird. Like they're owned by the same company, so maybe at one point.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. We'll see. Cause like I don't know this to be true, but I've always felt like that. Alpha Theta, who owns Pioneer now, like Alpha Theta, I feel like they bought Serato for their stem technology. But that deal hasn't fully gone through yet.
Oh, it hasn't.
I mean, I haven't been that updated, but like maybe it's going through now. But I know like as of NAMM, which was just a few months ago, it was like held up in like some like New Zealand like you know, trade commission type board or something.
And maybe by the time this comes out it'll be different too. So who knows? I don't know when it's going to come out, but yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yo, can we break? I gotta take a leak.
Yeah. Go.
Where's your bathroom?
We took a quick pee break. Is there anything else here that we think we should go over? Because I feel like, you know, I don't want to get too much into like speculation. I did want to quickly ask you actually, because, you know, it seems like you go to some of these music tech conferences and stuff. Is there any one that's just like dope? I've heard that, is it NAMM or one of them I've heard from a YouTuber that I like, this guy, Ben Jordan, if you know. He was just talking about how like, I think it was NAMM. It's just like not as exciting as it used to be.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not. Okay.
So I particularly enjoy Superbooth. Superbooth is the world's biggest synthesizer convention. It's in Berlin. And Superbooth is just an entirely different environment compared to NAMM. NAMM is like a behemoth. It's huge. It takes over the entire Anaheim Convention Center. It's mostly like funded and like ran by like the bigger brands, like, you know, Yamaha, Korg, Roland, big guitar brands, big drum brands, every brass and woodwind brand you could think of. There's a section in NAMM where there's like all the brass and woodwind stuff, and it's like in between where like the guitar section is and where like the DJ section is. And like it's just like just mess of just noise at NAMM. And like every musician that's there is just like all demoing every instrument, just showing off their chops. And like you got drummers having drum offs. You got,
so it's loud.
Yeah, you got organ players having
organ offs. Yeah,
just like a straight cacophony of just every instrument you could hear.
That sounds or you so could think draining.
Of. Yeah, and like it instantly snapped me back to a time where I worked in
guitars.
Stores
yeah, I was
that
gonna
sounded
say
like this.
Yeah.
So it was something that I wasn't adverse to, but when you're just there and taking it all in, you're just like, wow, this place is really loud.
We need more headphones at NAMM.
Yeah, and Superbooth is like you take away all of those other instruments, and like every room is just like boop 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 boop, and like just like lots of like literally just bleep bloops, and like every now and again you'll like hear a few like 4-on-4 like kick drums, depending on if they got somebody performing. But Superbooth has definitely captured this like new wave of like where these tech conferences are going, where they're like kind of blending conference and festival together. And Superbooth is like a great blend of that. Like the way that they set up their performances, they have like 2 or 3 different stages. One of them is like in this like beach volleyball pit, and the other one is like right in front of this like man-made pond. And I mean, the entire convention happens on this like campground activity center that's like meant for like families and kids and stuff. Like it's like just a very weird combination to begin with, but it's also like just a lot more chill. And you know, I'll just say it's like just not Americanized. NAMM is like super, you know, Americanized, and like every bit that like, you know, you may loathe about American capitalism and just
it's there.
Yeah.
Okay.
including lots of like the bands and performances that you hear at NAMM are like, you know, usually lots of cover bands, and like again, it's all about just showing off your chops at NAMM. So that's why when I got to play a beat set at NAMM, I was like really stoked about that, because I know that there's like not a lot of that. Not typically. Shout out to like all of the West Coast producers though that have shown out at NAMM over the last few years. But yeah, every time I go to NAMM, I definitely think about how much of a contrast it is compared to Superbooth, because I actually went to Superbooth before I went to NAMM, so I kind of spoiled my NAMM experience to begin with like going out to Berlin first, taking out the coolness of Berlin, and then being doused in American conference culture, you know, in Anaheim. But I mean, all that to say that they're all still cool within itself, because it's all a gathering of gearheads and, you know, musicians and just heads that are really into seeing new gear, seeing new instruments. So yeah.
Cool. Well, speaking of gear, you know, we alluded to the whole like modular aspect of like analog synthesizers and tech that you're getting into. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of get into that. I got a couple questions, but what marks like the start of like your modular journey?
For me, or like in general when you're getting into it?
Well, I have some questions like that too, but for you.
For me, this was also in like this also was in 2016. So like I was getting into modular like right when I started Open Beats. I didn't really start performing with modular though until actually the pandemic hit, when I was performing at home, and all my modular was just sitting right there anyway.
Yeah, so you just got like a camera, boom.
Yeah, and it was like, you know what, I'm finally getting comfortable enough. So it took me like all of like 4 or 5 years of like experimenting, learning, doing lots of buying and selling, trading, to get to the point where I felt comfortable enough to go out and perform live with all of this stuff through all of these patch cables. But then also being comfortable enough to basically like now there's not a synthesizer out there that like I can't put my head around, whether it be VST virtual synth or, you know, a straight standalone piece of hardware. All of the concepts, you know,
where you got to patch stuff,
right?
Yeah,
like all the concepts are still the same, and like you said, you learn synthesis, so eventually you realize that like even when you're faced with a wall with all these different modules, like when you find your oscillators, when you find your filters, when you find your envelope generators, when you find your sequencer, you find your way around, right? So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but you know, I'm kind of a tactile learner, so I don't recommend doing what I did, which is like, again, spending lots of time and money diving deep in this stuff, just to basically like learn and master it. Like there's plenty of other less costly avenues to learn modular synthesis out there.
Yeah.
You know, like mainly with like VCV Rack, which is like the software Euro Rack system. Like it's a free platform, And a lot of modules that exist in VCV Rack are like real modules that you could buy.
Yeah, so that's the thing that's like hard mode about analog or modular gear is that like, yeah, you have to buy something that just generates the sound, and then you have to get something that can actually, you know, play that as like a chord or like, you know, so it is costly in the fact that just getting that set up can be expensive, and it's like, how deep do you want to go with how good the quality is? And
yeah, my first module that I ever bought actually was a sampler. It was it's the Make Noise Morphogene, which is a sampler looper, and it could do granular stuff. But I totally had gotten into that because so there used to be this shop called Nerd Audio, and it was like a subsection of this DJ shop that I always would go to, Midwest Pro Sound Audio. They're not around anymore, RIP. But I would always go in there to get some DJ shit, either like some new Serato control vinyl or like needles, or sometimes I would rent systems for them. And every time I would like gradually creep over to the Nerd Audio section and just like see what the modular shit was all about. And finally, this person who's now a homie of mine, Corey, Red Stripe Down, he was like, he was working at the time. He was like, you know, there's sampler modules over here too. And I'm like, what? I didn't know that. And that was like all she wrote. Like the first system that I built, I thought I just wanted to build this like the stereo sampler that could do stereo effects processing. And I did that in a matter of like a few months. It was just like, all right, what's next? Because that's the one thing that I can say. It's like, it is hard to limit yourself. That's why people say it's a rabbit hole. If you try to say that you want to get into it to do one thing, you're going to end up doing another. So, you know, and not everybody takes that sort of approach to music making like the same. Like not everybody likes that way of doing things, and I get it. But I was just at this point in life where I was finally paying attention to the industry that is the Eurorack industry, seeing all the different brands and seeing like all of their different ideologies at play, and like, you know, their different branding and just marketing at play, and watching a lot of the content, watching a lot of like the YouTubers that like do modular, and just dove right into it and just realized that this is a really interesting way to make music. And then from there, I just started getting into like the original synthesis that like really sort of set the tone for like everything we do now, like Suzanne Chani and like Vangelis and like Hans Zimmer even, and Brian Eno, those cats, because like I would be sampling a lot of their stuff too, you know, and like Morton Sabachnik, his stuff is like crazy, and it was all done with a Buchla like modular system. So when I learned that, it was like, all right, I really want to know how to like make this stuff, so I could essentially make samples for myself, you know what I mean? Or just like know how all these crazy sounds were made, you know?
Yeah. I'm curious if there's a way that you would have done it differently if you could restart. And then also maybe this could be kind of like a buyer's guide for people who have not gotten into modular. That like this would be like maybe the first thing you get, because it's, I mean, obviously people are gonna have different use cases, but like maybe you could talk about yourself and kind of maybe if you would do it differently, you know. I don't know.
No, it's something I thought about. If I were to start over again now, I would actually I would go with buying a full system first. And what I mean by that is, when you are building your own system, you're doing that. You have to start with an empty rack. You have to decide on how much space you want. You have to meticulously decide on your next choices of modules that you choose based off the space of your rack, and then sometimes the power of your rack. So that's how you get into this constant mode of trying shit out, deciding if it works for you, and if it doesn't, then you're selling it on Reverb or going to your local synth shop to trade it in for another one. That could be fun in itself though, because if you're not adverse to trial and error, There's a lot of that.
And like the pieces hold their value probably pretty well.
This is like, to me, still the biggest attribute for Eurorack. Most of the Eurorack that's made actually increases in value because a lot of times there's only a few hundred of that model made. There's a few popular modules out there where there are now like thousands that are out there, but a lot of modular is like one of like 250, one of 100. Sometimes even more rare than that.
It's kind of like pedals in a sense.
Exactly like pedals in a sense.
Because it's
especially
like,
the boutique pedals.
You got boutique pedals, and then you got the ones that everyone's seen on stage. Yeah. But it is kind of like someone's like a guitarist pedal rack is almost in a similar space to like a modular system.
Yeah, and you even have a few brands, like a few pedal brands that are making Eurorack modules, and you have Eurorack modules that are making pedals now.
Yeah, you could use pedals in your module. Yeah, it's interesting. Are there any like Supreme looking or type Eurorack parts that are like so just sought after because they're so limited? Like
there is. There's a thing that's used a lot in circuits called Vactrils, and without getting too nerdy, and I couldn't even really tell you like all the particulars of Vactrils, but they're basically switches that are operated or that open and close by light, so they're like light sensitive.
Oh yeah, they have all these crazy things where it's like touch sensitive. Like I guess it reacts to like the electrical impulse of like your body. Like they'll just, but this is light.
Yeah, and to my understanding, no Vactro is the same because its innards will just react differently from Vactro to Vactro. Like so, their open and close time might be a little. They might differ from each one. So they're a big part of what is now known as like West Coast style synthesis, and this is an approach that was really built on from Don Buchla.
You've mentioned Don Buchla before.
So you have Bob Moog, who obviously built Moogs, and he was based over in the East Coast, and Bob Moog's philosophy was start with the oscillator and use filters to create
like subtractive
the sounds that you want, which is subtractive synthesis, right? Don Buchla's approach was take an oscillator and take another oscillator and modulate that other oscillator to generate your timbres and your different harmonics.
So you got like subtractive versus like kind of FM or additive. Yeah.
And generate your timbres in that regard with wave shaping and modulation from other oscillators. And then you run all of that into what's called a low pass gate, which is a combination of a low pass filter and a VCA. And within those low pass gates, he used Vactrils to basically like control the opening and closing of the gate itself. So they all offer a particular sound, and it's more of like a percussive, especially if you have it closed and you send a very tight pulse type envelope to trigger it. It gives you like a percussive type sound. So usually West Coast synthesis, like if you messed around with the Buchla and like V Collection or whatever, there's like that like bongo patch that like just sounds like electronic bongos.
Okay, I haven't, but I'm definitely gonna check that out.
Yeah, that's
in the Arturia thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have a version of the Buchla music easel in there, but a lot of that was built off of West Coast style philosophies. So there's a lot of Eurorack brands that every module they've made is like inspired by like a Buchla something. Particularly this brand called Make Noise, and that's like one of my favorite brands.
Do they make that one Maths?
Make Noise makes Maths.
Okay, I have a friend that got into synthesis, and he had that and a couple other of their stuff.
Make Noise also makes the Morphogene, which was my first module.
Okay.
So I've been a huge fan of Make Noise since I got into it. And again, every one of their modules is like based off of like a module that was done in the Buchla ecosphere. So even Maths is based off of this Buchla dual function generator, because that's what it is. It's just, I mean, they like have their own sort of
way of describing
exactly,
it, like yeah, like what do you call that, like brand wordings.
And like their own like I can never say the word iconography.
Oh yeah.
Which always attracted me. That's what attracted me to Make Noise in the begin to the begin, like in the beginning in the first place, because I'm a big aesthetics guy. So it's like, I'm not going to really use your hardware if it just doesn't look cool to me, first and foremost. And like, some people may like knock that approach, but like, that's just the way that I've always been. I might get into things later when I realize that it's cool, but like, if I don't like the way your piece of product is designed, I'm probably not going to try it in the first place. Make Noise was never like that. Like the mask, for instance,
looks sick. Yeah.
I saw that
even
module.
The font.
Yeah,
like, okay,
I saw that module. I'm like, what is this? Like, I hate math, but like, I need to understand like what they're talking about here. Like analog computer, like what? So I dove like right in, and you know, I mean, a lot of these modular brands too, to me at least, they move like underground rap labels. Like you know how especially like the mixtape era, like there were just like so many sub labels. Like every rapper had like his little label and like their team and like their whole style and their whole approach to everything. That's how a lot of these modular brands are. They have their own story, they have their own style, they have their own way of like making music. They have their whole sort of like ecosphere of like, you know, what inspired them to do what they do. And that's, to me, like the most interesting part about the whole Eurorack industry, because there's like hundreds of Eurorack brands to begin with.
Yeah. So you can kind of like, as a company, just like maybe start out like, I want to make something like this because it doesn't exist. And
there's a lot of that.
Yeah, like, yeah, no, that's really interesting just to like have like your own piece made by this company. And then I'm sure when they go to conferences and stuff, they're just like, there's probably collaborations between brands, and like that's super cool. It's more like boutique-y.
Yeah. 100%. And there's been lots of collaborations. There's been a few YouTubers that have like collaborated with a few prominent brands, and like made products, you know, that are good and like useful.
Yeah,
you know,
I've definitely seen a lot of that with like VST stuff, but like to do the whole analog thing. I feel like Andrew Huang, like
Andrew Huang's got he's got this multi-effects module and a pedal now called Ghost that he did with this brand called Endorphins. They're actually good friends of mine. People who run Endorphins, Julia Bondare and Andreas, shout out to them. But they partnered up with Andrew Wong, and they made the Ghost multi-effects module, which is like, it's basically like a dynamics module all in one. Like there's the reverb on there, there's a filter on there, there's like a saturator on there, and you can like change up the way that it's routed by just hitting a few buttons, and you could just have a totally different like signal chain based off of like whatever you're going for.
So
cool. They just put that in like in a pedal format too, so you can get it now in a Eurorack or pedal. And that's what I mean, like there's a lot of crossovers happening now with these worlds, because I mean a lot of them are using the same components, you know.
I feel like it's also a good play. Like obviously Andrew's really interested in that stuff, but he's also just a huge face in the music YouTube scene. So it's like great to have something like that.
Yeah, I've watched hours of Andrew.
He's dope.
You know,
Lucas, I'm kind of curious if you had anything bubbling over there. I know that this isn't necessarily your forte.
Way out of, no, it's not even that it's not my forte, it's way out of my realm of comprehension as far as like what I face. I don't, maybe comprehension is the wrong way to put it, but it's just, it's nowhere near, I guess, the world of music as I know it. So I've been listening, because, you know, he brought up math as a joke to explain a particular product. I'm kind of like listening to people talk about math and I'm like not a mathematician, but I feel I'm interested. It's just like I'm trying to connect the dots, I guess. From my perspective, it's just my world of music is a very different language than this, so it's interesting to learn what your approach is.
Yeah, maths is so like, I mean, while we're on the subject, like maths, Make Noise Maths is one of the best selling Eurorack modules of all time. It is like, it's basically like a joke. When you get in a Eurorack, this will probably be one of the first jokes that you come across. And that's like, if you have a maths, if you use a maths, how do you use the maths? Behringer even cloned maths not too long ago.
Oh, here we go. We're tying it all back.
Yeah, they cloned maths not too long ago. They have a module called Abacus.
God, that's so funny.
And it's like they didn't even really need to do it. Like maths is not that unattainable in terms of price. Like you could definitely find a used maths for like $150 to $200. I don't know how much the Abacus is. Maybe it's like $100, or maybe that was the argument. But it does the same thing. But all it really is it's a function generator. It generates functions in your Eurorack system. So we talked about, one of the drawbacks to modular is you're going to buy something that's, you're going to need something else to make a sound. Well, maths is that thing that can like generate the start of making those sounds. So if you have a maths, you have something that can do like 20 different things. So people call it like the Swiss Army knife for Eurorack. And it is that. It takes a bit to get your head around it. But yeah, so like you could generate envelopes with it. You can't
generate the sound. You still need an oscillator, right?
So what's crazy about maths is it's all volts, so it's all analog, right?
Yeah.
And the first thing you have to wrap your head around when it comes to Eurorack is not all Eurorack is analog, but all Eurorack is using voltages to basically do more or less the same things. Maths, though, is an all analog module. And it's literally using voltages just to create these functions. So I said all that to say that you can actually get sound out of maths. It's like, doesn't sound great, but
because it's just voltage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I have a work colleague of mine that like recently got in the Eurorack in the last year or two. And like we have this little group in Slack that's like all for the synth heads, and I've watched him like be like a noob in Eurorack. And like when you're at that point of like fascination, you're not really limited with like what you know that you can't do, so you're just thinking about all the possibilities of what you think you can do. And he was going through that with maths and basically thinking out using maths as an oscillator and yada yada. And people like myself and other people that's been around the Eurorack scene for a minute, you just kind of like chuckle at that, because it's like, that's cute. It's dope that you're thinking about it that way. That's how you should approach every module. But at the end of the day, you're probably not going to use this module as an oscillator when you realize that it excels in so many other things. But that is a very important, a key thing to kind of learn with Eurorack. And lots of people that's been around for a while will also tell you this as well. And that's like, try to master every part of that module before you decide it's like not for you. Because I'll tell you, there's modules out there that I have sold and I end up buying again, because like it was after that point that I realized, I didn't even try X, Y, and Z. Let me go get this again now. And then I get it again and I don't let it go.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's but the world of YouTube and YouTube University again has made a lot of this stuff like accessible to learn. Like if you just dedicated a couple hours of the day, you can at least wrap your head around what is this Eurorack thing just by like digesting a few videos.
It's daunting too, because you have to actually dive into like knowing like electricity and like basic stuff. Like when they start using things like ohms and amps and stuff, you're just like, oh, wait a minute,
this
ohms?
Is true.
Like what is resistance? And like I was also just thinking, are there like this is just like a tangent question slightly, but like do most Euroracks use 120 or do they use 240? Like do you got like a real powerful one that can
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting
This is
point.
such a nerd
Yeah.
question.
No, that's an interesting point because I mean, you have to like. So when I take my system over from United States over to Europe, I do have to like use a voltage converter.
Right.
But most cases come with that transformer that can accept either 120 or 220.
Okay.
And then most power control boards, either you have a transformer on the power to that case, or you have a transformer built within your system. Like a lot of older Dofer systems have the transformer built into them. And it's like arguable, like what power control boards sound better than the other.
Yeah,
and
like is it
gives
changing
you-
the character of your sound?
gives you less hum and
Yeah,
all that. And that is definitely like, you know, you're really deep in the rabbit hole.
Yeah,
when
we might be too deep. I'm sure some people are listening to this for like the, you know, like beat making side of things.
Yeah.
So, you know, without going too deep into that, I'm sure we could nerd out all day.
Yeah.
Maybe we save that for after podcast.
Yeah, no, it's all good. But like, I mean, above all else, like, there's never been a more accessible time if you are a beat maker to at least try Modular out. You don't even have to buy it. You could just, again, get something like VCV Rack or look deeper into some of the VSTs or software that you're already using, because they might have a synth that's like based off of a old Modular synth or something. You know, like there was a Modular synth in Reason that I didn't even really know about until I got back into using Reason.
Oh,
You
really?
know?
That would
Yeah.
make sense because they're kind of, it's already like kind
Yeah,
of
you're
modular.
already patching. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I think definitely a lot of people probably are just like, I don't want to mess with that. Like they start learning about like a VCF and they're like, why does this matter to making music? But the only thing I'll say, at least coming from the approach of learning synthesis first on my end, is, you know, knowledge is forever in the sense that like once you learn it, then you at least have a better understanding of like, you know, what is maybe happening with some of the sounds that you're sampling. So I would encourage anyone to go just fuck around with that. You probably go to a store and just fuck around too.
Yeah. I will say too, ever since I took my step into the synthesis abyss, like my
synthesis abyss,
because I was, you know, I came up sampling. Like I'm not traditionally trained in anything. I'm a DJ and I collected records and I sampled shitloads of them. But and going a step further with sort of trying to learn synthesis, like I feel like that has like honed my sampling ear as well. Like I don't hear samples in the way that I like used to before I like, you know, understood like what an actual envelope and filter does. You know what I mean? So now that's only like enhanced my sampling in a way because I'm able to understand what effect does shortening up this envelope or applying this filter to this like soul sample has, you know? And yeah, I mean it's definitely something I encourage like all producers to sort of take a step deeper in. And then as you like get in or at least like move around in the industry more, you do start to realize that like a lot of like, you know, your idols or people that like been in the game for a while, like they've taken this deep journey too. Like, I mean, they've, you know, obviously risen to a point where they're able to afford a lot of these tools, which I know is really important. But, you know, for as sample based and loop based as like the Alchemist is, Alchemist still has like a Moog and like a Juno and like knows how to use that shit when he needs to, you know? So,
yeah.
Yeah,
it's almost like a manifestation of just going deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. That's what this is.
Right.
If you like music, it's a deep rabbit hole.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I think we should probably start wrapping up. We've been going for a bit. I just wanted to quickly ask about WFXR. Or was that the correct acronym, or did I get it right?
Yeah, man.
Okay, yeah. So as you explained it to me, it's you and another guy. You guys do modular performances, and you actually did one last night, and it was the second one you've done out, right?
Yeah.
As this group.
Yeah. So yeah, it's me and my homie Rob. He goes by Robot Man Machine, or RMM for short. And me and him totally met, like just being two modular nerds. Like there used to be this thing that a buddy of mine put on called Modular on the Spot. It like started somewhere else. I think it started in like Minneapolis or something. I think it started actually by this guy that works for Make Noise, but it's sort of like spread out throughout the entire Eurorack scene throughout the world, and people started doing modular on the spots in their like respective city and whatnot. And the idea was like, you know, you just meet at a spot, somebody provides power and a little speaker, and you bring your modular rig, and it's kind of like open beats. You do like a 15-20 minute set.
Yeah.
A lot of it is, you know, a lot of modular music in general is like ambient or noise stuff or just like not conventional music. I've always accepted that. I've always celebrated that. And I also always realized that that's cool, that's what y'all do. But I'm going to take what the same tools that y'all are doing with that, and I'm going to apply that to like these beats that I'm making. It's always been my MO. So I've met a lot of like-minded individuals along the way that's also approached Eurorack and this entire modular scene in that same regard. And Rob's one of those dudes. His approach is goes a little bit deeper with recreating house and techno, particularly acid house, by way of using Eurorack. And he's also a little bit older than me too, so like he's you know, like when you come up you know, in hip hop or whatever, like a lot of rappers always like to like point to like their like OGs that like brought them in,
Yeah.
you know, to the scene and whatnot. And like Rob is like that for me when it comes to like Chicago house in particular, and techno for that matter. I've been around for as long as I've been around to have my own sort of relationship to Chicago house, to techno, to footwork, to ghetto tech. But with Rob and him being a little bit older, when we met and started sharing stories, I started finding out things that like he used to work, or he used to open up for the late great Paul Johnson, and like we're like from like the same area of the suburbs, except again he was just a little bit older than me, so he was like already out in the clubs and doing his DJ thing while I was still in high school, you know. But anyways, like we met like and gained that kinship like very quickly, but we again were also knee deep in the Eurorack and trying to figure this shit out for ourselves and be our own solo artists and whatnot. And then we became dad friends because we both have daughters like that are toddlers, and from there it was just like we started jamming together. That was probably about like a year and a half ago at this point, and we've been kind of scheming on this duo ever since. And so WFXR, it's definitely a play on like you know, like a radio station name.
That's what I was saying when
Yeah.
you said it first. I was like, yeah, it sounds like a radio.
Yeah, and I mean, so to keep it fully 100 with you, I mean, it that's kind of the vibe we're going for. And back in the 80s, there used to be, on 102.7, it used to be WBMX, and they used to have a lot of like, you know, were the pioneers of house DJs. They were playing their mixes and featured on that radio station a lot in the mid 80s, like, you know, Frankie Knuckles and like Bad Boy Bill and like DJs like that. And while I wasn't fully around to like experience that, like I was literally a baby at that point, like Rob was like, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old, hearing that coming up. And I kind of had to like go back and kind of like study up on that era. But there's a lot of like WBMX mixes that you can find on YouTube like right now.
I'm definitely looking that up later. I'm 100% gonna run one of those when I'm driving today.
Yeah, dude. They're out there, and so like we're kind of like taking that vibe and recreating that live on stage. And we got like a bunch of other stuff playing, as far as like biting on the whole radio bit a little bit, because you know radio's kind of dead now anyway. But
now it's podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah, so we kind of got like a lot to say by way of hardware-based electronic music. So
nice. That's fucking dope, man. I feel like, you know, I hope to catch a show sometime soon, and definitely would be interested in just like hearing some of the music you guys make. Just a real quick, because like I don't know, we've been going for a minute. Just a real quick, like, what's the goal in mind? Are you going to do the radio station? Are you guys going to release like a project?
Yeah, man, we got some projects coming.
Okay.
Projects plural.
Okay.
So look out for that.
Cool.
And yeah, just also just gonna continue to play shows because that's really our MO. It's interesting. Like last night, like you said, was our second show ever. We played for like 90 minutes, and we played like 2 tracks that were like prepared. Everything else was just like improv and like off the cuff.
Nice.
So that's really what we're about. And
That just sounds exciting for yourself personally. Like you're just doing something. You don't even know what you're about to do.
Right.
That just sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And that's another reason why I embrace modular a lot. Because once I realized that like this could be an improvisational instrument, particularly for myself, who I mean, I know how to dabble with the keyboard, but I don't call myself a keyboard player. I understand a little bit of theory, but I don't call myself like a composer or whatever. Modular, particularly modular of today, it caters to a lot of that, to where like you can kind of set the notes that you want to play and sort of let the machine, let your system like play those notes out in a way that's like live and changing all the time. Generative
music, yeah, definitely like the Brian Eno type of thing. Yeah, dude. No, it's super exciting. I'm very curious. I know a lot of people that have gotten into modular and just like make these mud pies and then sample that, and it's literally like a generator of samples, just musical ideas. So it's really exciting. Obviously, there's a little bit of like a barrier to entry with the money thing, but I could definitely see myself down the road,
man,
getting that gear lust and going in. But yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like I say, with most things, when it comes to music, it's like if you really want to go somewhere with it, at some point you gotta like invest in yourself, and you just gotta decide on what areas of investment are important for you. You know? So
totally, dude. Well, we've gone to a lot of different places in this conversation. You have a lot of different hats that you wear, so I just appreciate you taking us down some of these roads.
Man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for coming through. I think that's kind of like a through line through this conversation, is like, as a musician, you have to wear a lot of different hats to be successful.
Yeah.
Your camera cut.
Oh, it did.
It went black. His still works, but right like about 5 seconds ago, yours.
Sorry about that. Minor technical difficulty. I just wanted to wrap up this conversation as we normally do. We talked about your first concert, but what is like the game-changing concert that you went to that you were like, damn, dude, this is like, I need to like change how I think about stuff, like, or it did change how you think about stuff from seeing it? Just something like the most impactful concert you went to.
You know what? Yeah, because I actually just had this this commemorative moment last year, but it was 2013 North Coast Music Fest. This was one of the first. This was like the first or second North Coast ever
at Union Park.
This was at Was it? Yeah, it was at Union Park. Yeah, this is where they had Pitchfork at. That's right. God, it was a crazy lineup. They had like Nas and Damian Marley, Jay Electronica. It was like back when they were doing mixed genre stuff.
Back when it was good.
Yeah.
Let's just say.
And they had Flying Lotus. I was lucky enough to be able to score press passes for my guy who used to run this blog called WBC Magazine, and I was going to do like video correspondence for him, and this was back at a time where I was like really getting into producing, but I was also still rapping, and I was DJing a lot. But I was also like, by this point in time, I had like performed at Push Beats a couple times. I was hip to Low End Theory, and I was hip to Flying Lotus. And like Cosmogramma had just came out. So I was like really hip to Flying Lotus. So from the moment that I scored these press passes, I knew that like I was going to be there backstage and like try to get to him and see if I could get an interview, yada yada. I was able to do all of that, and there's probably still footage of this online.
I'm digging this up. Is it on YouTube?
Yeah. Yeah. If you Google Fess Grandiose on YouTube, you'll see a bunch of stuff. If you dig deep enough, you'll probably be able to find like a WBC magazine wrap up from North Coast in 2013, because there was a few interviews I did. I got to interview Pasta News from De La Soul. The Flying Lotus interview I did, it wasn't video. This is actually like one of my main shortcomings in life. I got to interview Flying Lotus after his show in his green room, and he asked for no video, so I recorded it on an old phone that I do not know where it is anymore. So I have this old interview of Flying Lotus, just audio from like 10, 11 years ago. It's just lost in the ether.
No.
Yeah. But it is documented of me being on stage right next to this dude when he was fucking doing a killer ass set at North Coast right before Nas and Damian Marley. There's even a certain point where we were sharing the exchange of one marijuana cigarette on stage. But that show definitely, like, that show shaped like what I'm doing right now. Like, it was at that moment where I realized, like, yo, because he was using Ableton live. So I was like probably at the point where I really dove deeper into Ableton, using it as a live tool. But then I was also the point where I realized that, like, yo, what he does can be on this festival stage. This is what I'm trying to do. And yeah, I didn't really look back since, which is kind of crazy to think about. And actually last year I performed at North Coast. So last year was like, I had this thought, like, damn, 10 years ago I was doing press here. Now I'm doing a modular set here in like the
Chill Dome.
In the Chill Dome, yeah.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And I mean, shout out Pat Grumley. He's the one that like started North Coast. And
I was also throwing a little shade at North Coast. I've had a lot of good times there.
Yeah.
It's just changed a lot.
Oh, it's changed a lot, dude. And like, don't get me wrong, like, I understand where you're coming from. But shout out Pat Grumley, because he's always been a fan of mine anyway. Like, I've done several shows throughout the years, and then look out in the crowd, and then he'll just be out there, which is like dope to have somebody like that like show up to your stuff. But yeah, man, that was definitely an impactful moment. And I mean, being from the viewpoint that I was at too, obviously, you know, would leave an impact on anybody.
For sure. That's a great answer.
Yeah, man.
Well, we always end with shout outs. Is there anyone else you want to shout out?
Man, just shout out the entire beat scene of Chicago. Whether you've been able to tap in with us or not, like, shout out everybody that's involved. Shout out all of the other nights that are involved. Open Swim with Slot A, and Live Beats with Rodolfo, and it's like, you need to bring House of Beats back too, man. Like,
It would be. I want. To, yeah.
Yours went off. Sorry to interrupt. Yours went off again.
Really?
Does that matter to you?
That's okay. We'll just keep it on Fest. Yeah, we'll just run it. It
sounds good.
Yeah. And also too, man, like, I met y'all at Open Beats, but I also feel like that, like, Corey or Before Lasers is like a big connector with all of us too.
Beacon of the community.
Shout out Before Lasers.
And that's also somebody who I solely only know from Open Beats. He pulls up to Open Beats about a year ago, and we had already moved it to Dorian's at this point. And you guys know how it is. Like, I try to get everybody I can in, but like, sometimes I just can't get everybody in. So this is one of those nights where he just got there a little bit too late. It was like, man, we could maybe get to you later. Might not. I'll hold your slot, yada, yada. And he just goes, that's cool, man. You think I could like pull up and play some of my shit outside through my car?
He always tells this
And I was
story.
just like, yeah, I mean, I don't own outside. Like, God bless you. Plus, I like that type of energy. Like,
yeah.
It's like, you came out all the way out here, like, you're going to play your shit from somebody. I've always respected him just from like how he took that and, you know, still made a positive out of it. So that's the other thing that I do too. And I'm very like subtle about this. People that know me know enough about this, but like, if you're somebody new and you're coming out to open beats or one of these nights and you're trying to like play, you're trying to get involved in the scene and whatnot, one of the best things that you could do is just be in the scene and support the artist before you and the artist after you that's performing, you know? And I've always tried to just lead by example with that. There's been plenty of open beats where like I brought my shit out, I planned to play something, but I don't play in lieu of letting somebody else who I don't know play. And like, that's just always going to be the MO of that night. But yeah, to anybody that's out there, like, you know, wondering how to like break through, like just come out and be a person.
That's like, I feel like this podcast, and you guys can't see me, but this podcast for me is at almost like a scientific method thing where like if enough people say something, there's got to be some truth in it. And that is something I hear all the time. It's like, go out, be a person in the world and make real connections.
Right.
And, you know, there is this thing where it's like, oh, I can just sit on the computer and be online and be very successful. And you can, but I would say the human interaction is just crucial.
Totally.
So yeah, so shout out the Chicago beat scene. Okay, one last question I just really quick, because I wanted to ask this earlier, was Chicago beat scene versus like other beat scenes. How do we rate that in like, because there's a lot of beat scenes that have percolated like around the US.
This is the only time you ever get me to talk shit. Because I don't really talk shit. I'm not like a big, like I used to talk a lot of shit when I was younger, and then I got older and I realized that I didn't really know shit. But this is where you get me to talk shit, because I'm Chicago for life, you know, full bred Chicagoan, and everything I do. I'm one of those, like, when I go to other cities and I see people's downtown, I'm just like, all right, this is kind of cool, but like.
That's how I feel too. I like was driving into Chicago not that long ago. I'm like, now that's a skyline.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I will be like that to the day that I die, and I put our beat scene over any beat scene. I put our music scene over any music scene right now, because it's going further than the beat scene. Our hip hop scene is just like, we have, when you talk about like artists like Saba and of course Chance the Rapper, No Name, artists like that are like, you know, kind of like transcending the style of what people expect to hear with Chicago music, because obviously drill is always going to be a thing, but you know, I respect what those artists have done in the last decade with being able to like make Chicago be known for more than that. And the beat scene is not that far behind. Take somebody like Slot A, for instance, and like the work that he's done with Jamila Woods. I mean, Slot A is, you know, a national treasure when it comes to like that real raw hip hop sound. So I feel like we got heavy hitters here. Even like I said earlier, with Before Lasers, like, so after I met him and he came out to open beats, I had to backtrack and get into his stuff, and that's when I realized how much of a heavy hitter he was. You know what I mean? He is. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we got some hitters out here, man, and like it's just, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You go to House, of course, we still got you know, that held down as being the place that created it. So I don't know, man. Like, I mean, there's definitely your cats out in LA, but you know, how many cats are actually that are in the LA beat scene that are like actually from LA? Like, you got to get in that whole argument too. But you know, I also will say this, and I'll leave on this note. New York has got some very dope things happening now too with their electronic scene, not just like in the lo-fi beat scene, which they always had that down with being the place where hip hop is born, but also with their house and techno scene, with artists like Jay Words and Acemo and Mo Moretti and Kush Jones and DJ Swisha, like all those cats, they're bringing it. And that night that they do out there, Dweller, I don't know
Dweller?
If you, yeah, I don't know if you're
That
familiar with
sounds
that.
sick.
Dweller is
bro.
a
I like the name.
Dweller is a 2-night. It's either 2 or 3 night electronic festival where they only book black electronic artists, and I think they're in like their 3rd or 4th year now. So it's kind of like a electronic Afro punk, if you will, but like all that's coming out of New York right now.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll talk shit about Chicago being the best, of course, but I definitely got to give respect to what's also happening out there too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Word. Well, thank you for the education. I feel like I learned a lot of stuff here. I hope people listening have also done the same. I know we got a little into the weeds with some technical stuff. Hopefully you stuck around for that part. But yeah, last thing, where can people find you, like online and all that stuff?
Yeah, I'm everywhere. If you just Google Fess Grandiose, you'll find some music. You'll find a few videos about gear and gear nerd shit. So yeah, I mean, that's the best place to find me and reach out to me. You could also follow Open Beats on Instagram to know when the next one is happening. We go every last Friday of the month, and we've had that Friday of the month for quite a while. So
make sure people notice they gotta show up early if they want to play.
Yeah, you do gotta show up early if you want to play. I mean, it's just the way it is. People have asked me over the years to like move things to like online sign up and like have the lineup, have the open set lineup set before the night even starts, and that's just not the spirit of Open Beats. It was always supposed to be like a walk up open mic, so I'm just going to keep that going for as long as humanly possible. So if you want to play, get there early.
That's fair.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, dude. Well, thank you so much for coming through. Yeah, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.
Peace.
Peace.
I like the still looking at the camera even though it's off. It's so in your arsenal of behavior.
I gotta do it. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I'm looking at
I was watching you looking at the lens. I'm like, did he forget this?